Okay, welcome back to this epically long story on learning receivership. The only reason I think it's worth going into this in such detail is because I think that there's so much rhetoric at the moment of like, just open to receive, just learn it, just like do this. And I think that receivership is it's an understanding that happens as we go through time, as we unlock information, and your story is going to be different to mine. But if you track your story back and you really have an understanding of these are the themes in my life, these are the things that I do really well at, how did I learn that? Where did it come from? You'll start to actually be able to decode and unpick. I receive a lot from this source, or I learn in this way, because we talk about it from like a mental perspective of, a visual, an auditory, a kinesthetic, all of these kinds like styles of learning for acquired knowledge. But femininity is not acquired knowledge. It's remembered, it's unearthed, it's uncovered, it's activated within you. You are born with this. Your masculine codes and your feminine codes are innate. They are within you. But what happens over time is that we come from this structure in society that puts one aspect of that on a pedestal and demonizes or denotes one as not required, not worthy, not interesting, or more importantly, as wrong. So one of the ways that you can really tap into this in terms of like your feminine embodied, what you need to embody as a feminine is what I meant. What are the things that you've been told you do too much? No surprises for me, because I can literally talk to nobody for an hour and a half and have to cut myself off. I talk too much. Or I literally don't talk enough to create a podcast. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, to what end are you doing it too much? You're too caring, you're too kind, you're too empathetic, you're too feeling, you're too emotional. Well, we'll get into that one, but that's a whole episode. But the whole point is like when you're unearthing that aspect of you that has been forced into hiding. Most of us don't have our masculine forced into hiding. So we kind of know like, oh, I'm really good at setting myself rules, structures, and boundaries, or I'm really good at creating, some architecture or some, container around what I do. And if you're not, a part of unearthing and remembering your feminine is that the natural requirement for the feminine to come online and to come out and to be embodied and to be bigger is definitely she's going to prompt you to activate him as well, to activate that container, to activate that safety. So these are not things, I think a lot of the sort of 30-second, 15-second reels that happen about embodiment or about feminine flow or about feminine business, it feels like you need to deconstruct the masculine in order to construct the feminine in its place and then live from there. And that's 100% not true. You're not trying to be masculine or feminine. You're trying to be, hold on. You're not trying to be masculine and you're not trying to be feminine. You're seeking out a remembering that is already functioning within you, which is the unity of your masculine and of your feminine as a fully actualized being, where you can then optimize and maximize the overall efficiency and productivity of your biotechnology system. Said in another way, you want to become the fullest version of you, the truest version of you in coherence. And if you are only feminine or you're only masculine or you're operating in one extreme and one, not at all, that's not coherent, because your truth is that you are unity, you are unified. And the goal isn't that we become this truly feminine world. The goal is that we become unified in harmonic resonance with the earth in a coherent, truth-based way, where only truth exists, where only unity exists, where only harmony exists. And because the feminine is suppressed and subjugated to a lot of what is deemed unimportant under the eyes of the misogynistic, patriarchal, capitalist sort of structure that we live in, that's why we talk about embodying the feminine and activating the feminine, because we've had so many years of disembodied femininity that these masculine systems have gotten out of balance. So the idea is not to come into a fully feminine, the water will be everywhere. We need the banks. We need something to contain the current. And, when we talk about receiving, you need something to receive it into, right? So the feminine cannot be embodied without having a container, a safe container of the masculine to hold it into. That's why we need the yin in the yang and the yang in the yin. We need this to be in unity. We need this to be in harmony. We need this Vesica Pisces to operate around each other. Okay, so going back, I've done this long history of receiving, activating the codes, activating the resilience and the capacity that I have within myself. And my grandmother dies. I start to see the source of you is the foundation upon which you build your entire life, your entire business, your entire self. Okay, so we're leaving off. This is 2016. This is 10 years ago. Everything that I gave you was like 10 years and prior. Now we're 10 years ago, and I want to give you this next part of the story, because what happens in this last 10 years is that was like the pre-work. Part one is like the pre-work to the work. It was like setting the foundation, setting the codes, activating those seeds, planting that everywhere, traveling, getting those codes, getting what I needed in my system so that this next 10 years could tend to fertile soil. So my grandmother dies. I see all of this ickiness and I'm like, all I can think about my whole time is, oh, by the way, it also coincides with my Saturn returns. So this is really important. My Saturn return came a little early, probably brought on by this. So it was actually 27 when I did my Saturn return, but it was long. It was like 2 years. So I started early and then, needed to wait, I guess, for that to happen. Anyway, so I get this call and I'm like, I'm going to sort. I had persistent, consistent acne, and I was feeling that. I was also really outgrowing my relationship. So that was my first ever it wasn't even just my first proper relationship. It was my first ever boyfriend, and we were together for 5 years. And I wanted to break up with him 3 months into the relationship, and we stayed together for 5 years. Anyway, we'll do another episode on that. But so I decided to end that relationship, to pack up all my stuff from our apartment, drive it. I was living in Sydney at that time. We met in Beijing. We lived in Perth together for a while. During the time that we were in Beijing, before moving to Perth and after I left Beijing, I had actually gone on a 6-month travel trip by myself. And it felt really, really good. But I came back with him and we stayed together in Perth, and our relationship was just such a struggle. We were such a mismatch of energies and being out of alignment in so many different ways. He was a beautiful person and I loved him a lot, so deeply, but nothing about our relationship was aligned. And it was just trying so hard to make a relationship with someone who was so beautiful work when it was not for us. It was very karmic. The moment that I met him, it was oh my God, I can remember everything about our lives and about this aspect of self. And I think sometimes for me, because I can remember so deeply somebody, and because my life has been so karmic, like it's everything in my astrology, my human design, my like any psychic I've ever read was like, whoa, what are you here to destroy? Yeah, it's been big. Yeah, it's all good. I'm like made for it. It's fine. I've got and that's probably why I needed all of those codes, right? When you're coming in and like every single day is like blowing something up, you've got to feel really good and solid in yourself to do that, because you make a lot of people uncomfortable with your mere presence of like, I don't stand for anything less than this. And what I stand for is what most people on the planet don't live up to. So every single relationship that I've really had at any level has been very like friction, a lot of friction, because my system's like, oh, this is not truth. I don't like it. And I became too good at overriding those issues with friction because of the family that I came in, and it was like really normalized. But it was normalized for me in order for me to actually be able to feel like that's what it is. I identify it. That's what's not meant to be, so that I could feel that in my body. So every time I was in a different relationship, I could feel it. But what had happened when I was younger was I normalized, this is love. Like when I feel really so much friction in my body and so much like discomfort with being in the presence of someone or someones who are not coherent, who are not living in truth, who are not living in their ultimate alignment. I had 18 years of overriding that discomfort and labeling it as love, connection, safety, normal. And so that was a really big journey for me to be like, it's just not. Like, I don't want to be in this discomfort anymore. And so for a long time, I erroneously labeled that as I find it uncomfortable to be comfortable, thinking that family is comfort. And I was so uncomfortable in that. I was so uncomfortable in that every single day. And so these people that came into my life helped me understand, why am I feeling so much friction all the time, and looking at their lives and being like, they're so incongruent, they're so out of coherence, they live a lie. And then finally one day it just like, it clicked, and I was having so much acne on my face all around this time, like nowhere else, just my face. And I ended up going to India, to Kerala, and doing a panchakarma for 28 days. And during that time, I lost like 7 kilos. My face went like acne on acne on acne, and it was like painful and huge. And I had it everywhere, and it scarred really badly after that. And it took like another 3 or 4 months. It was just coming and coming and coming and coming. And I had a lot of gut issues then that I didn't even know that I had, and all of this stuff. It was like this huge purification. And after that purification, after that panchakarma, I was so clear. I literally almost didn't eat. I don't think that was correct for my system, because I'm like vata dominant, and I had too much pitta and not enough kapha, but I was doing like enemas and like fasting. I was 56 kilos when I left. So I was like, should have been some kind of a, I'm 167 centimeters and I was 56 kilos. Like, I was very, very thin, very emancipated. My hair was falling out. It was all of the stuff. And everyone around me was like, oh my God, I feel so amazing. My panchakarma is so great. Like, I feel like on top of the world now. And I was like, I'm close to death. Like, what's happening? Like, why is this going so badly in the wrong direction? But I emptied my entire vessel and I just went with the system. And there was no technology, there was no internet, there was none of this kind of stuff, right? So we were like in it. And I didn't go to like a luxury Western spa. I went to an Indian place with like, I was sleeping on a cot, you know, like rugged. But the people were amazing and it was really authentic. And it was interesting. It was only French people at this place, and the Indian doctors and nurses didn't speak French, and the French people mostly didn't speak English, and I ended up being the translator for everyone. And as I did that, I got close with this woman who was learning how to read the Akashic records. And this part of me, and I was like such a clear vessel at this period, and like parasite cleanses and every cleanse, like it was like there's literally nothing left in my stomach, there's nothing left in my bowel, like I'm cleared out like completely. And it was interesting because every single acne that I ever got for the rest of my life, like I never got acne again after this Panchakarma. But it was brutal. It was so brutal. And she was talking to me about Akashic records and like, oh, you're helping us so much. Like, can I do a reading for you? And that was the first activation point, because I'd never heard about this stuff before then. I'd never heard about it in my personal memory. And she sort of activated interesting ideas for me. And so after that, I was like, I'm going to stay in India. This woman was French, but I was like, I need to stay in India. And there was this couch surfer that I came across her profile, and she was in Delhi and I was in Kerala. So, 10 minutes away. Completely other end of the country. Had no plans to go to Delhi. I didn't want to go to Delhi. I wanted like a peaceful thing. I wanted to go to the Maldives and relax after this. And I wrote to her and she didn't respond for the entire month. I ended up, because she hadn't responded, going to the Maldives. And then when I was in the Maldives, I was like, I don't know, I feel like I'm supposed to go back to Delhi to see this woman, but she's not responding. And this is really weird because normally things like just like click into place for me. And everybody kept saying, well, if you want to go to Delhi, just go and like find a hotel or find another person. I was like, no, I don't want to go to Delhi. I want to meet this woman. I need to meet this woman. I don't want to meet anybody else, just her. This is what I'm doing. And it made no sense. I had no idea what I was doing. So, get to the last day before I need to take my flight and book it. And she responds. And she says, hi, Kate. Yes, I've looked into you. You're meant to come. Sorry for putting you through the stress, but you needed to really, really, really activate the invitation through full body desire and want and readiness and willingness. And I was like, that's a super weird message. Okay, I'll book my flight and come. Didn't think about it. Anyway, so I get to Delhi, I get to her house, and like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Like I nearly got kidnapped. I nearly got like robbed. Like all of this kind of stuff. Just, and people who've been to India is like, yeah, that happens. Like, I'm sorry, are you a white girl in Delhi? Yeah, obviously that's what happened to you. But then there's another part of it. It was like, it was such a contrast to my life. I'd been to dangerous countries before. I'd been, all throughout Africa and North Africa and Eastern Africa, and it was like, this never happened to me. So I knew it was more than just, this is India. Because it didn't feel like this is India. It felt like this is something. And I was getting really angry, a bit scared, a bit aggravated. And I arrived at the place eventually safely. And she came out and she was like, well, that's interesting. We've got a lot of work to do, you and I. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, your journey here was very intense and unnecessarily problematic. There was no ease. There was no receivership. There was no trust. You were in full fear and you had no idea what you personally could do to ensure your personal safety. Hi, I'm Kate. What's your name? It was the weirdest meeting, and it felt like I was in one of those Marvel movies meeting like the weird sorcerer who like was gonna tell you what's what. Anyway, so we went inside. It was really late at night. I went to bed, and then we woke up the next morning and she's like, okay, are you ready to commence your training? And I was like, what training? And she's like, well, I assumed that you had, felt the invitation and reached out to me to seek this training in what you're here to do. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm very willing and curious, and I feel like that's why I'm here. I don't know what you're going to teach me, but let's dive into it. And what was interesting about my stay there was that she never ended up teaching me anything. All she did was hold the codes of what she could do that were dormant and unactivated as yet in me. And so all of a sudden, like, what we would do is we would be like, okay, sit down and open up the Akashic records. So I'd never heard of them except for that lady in the hospital, and she was like such a novice. She couldn't do it. She was like, I tried really hard, but it's not really like my thing. I don't really know how to connect. She gave me a message and it was like all jumbled, like her energy wasn't pure, like it didn't make sense. And she was like, I'm sorry, I just don't know how to do it. And so I was like, that was my only reference point at this point. And the lady didn't say she opened up the records to like read a book or anything. She was just like, I'm trying to basically do a channeling or like a connection to like almost like a tarot reading she was doing. And so this woman, she sits in front of me and she was like, connect with your guides, connect with the council, and open up the akashas. And I just sat there and I was like, okay, what is that, body? What does that mean? And my head tried really hard and nothing happened. She never gave me any instruction. She refused to teach me because you can't teach someone to be themselves. And so the next day, she had a client come over and I was asleep on the couch. And I started dreaming about walking through this like Hogwarts library and like reading books and putting them back and reading books and putting them back. And then I walked over to like this other aisle and I saw her and the client. And she was talking and the client was listening and she was reading from this book. And then all of a sudden she snapped it closed and she was like, Kate, what are you doing here? Who gave you permission to be here and how did you arrive? And I was like, thinking I was in a dream, so I didn't say anything because I was like, this is a dream. I'm just watching what dreams do. But nothing happened. She's like, Kate, answer me. You're not in a dream right now. You're here with us. Wake up and talk. And I was like, you can hear, like you're interacting with me, you can hear me? And she was like, yes, who gave you permission to be here? And I was like, oh, I don't know, I thought I was just taking a nap. And she's like, well, you're not. You think you are, but you're not. You're in deep meditation and you've joined us in the Akashic Records. And I told you yesterday that you can only do that with the permission of the client and the council. So how did you get past everyone? And I was like, I don't know, I took a nap. Like, what are you talking about? Anyway, so long story short, we started doing our journey at that point. And that's when I really learned how to very cognizantly go in and look at specific aspects of me that, weren't aligned with my coherence, weren't aligned with my truth. And so there were only things that I got from my body. So I would be like, sit still, hold my body, and then it would be like a theme would come up. So for example, competition. And when that came up, I remember it because when that came up, it was like, why? Competition is great. I love being competitive. It drives me, it pushes me forward. It's like the thing that gets like everything done in my life. It's like, it's the mechanism of my life. I was a competitive swimmer. I was a competitive netball player, at the highest level in my age groups. And then, as I as I exited high school, was at that echelon of like, do you go professional? Do you get into that next level? So competition for me was a driver. Like I was swimming 4 hours a day. I was playing 2 to 3 hours of netball per day in season, and then 1 hour per day outside of season. I was like, there were 4 to 5 hours of high level intensity training for me for like 4 or 5 years of high school. And all of that was driven and predicated on competition. Then, as I said to you in part 1, my entire family was competing for this energy source. So competition was the foundational aspect of our life. I didn't know that at the time. I was like, we come from a loving family. We're so close and we always want to be around each other. Yeah, it's of course you want to be around each other. You're stealing each other's energy. You're competing for this one source of power. The way that competition also manifested in the family was like talking about each other and turning each other on each other, and having like weird alliances and weird power dynamics between siblings and parents and uncles and aunts. And it was like everybody was competing for scraps, because the foundation of competition is there's no infinite source. I need to fight somebody for another thing. Competitive, my body's first like clearing came out was like, being competitive, you are innately outside of the source of all that is. You are innately outside of this infinity source. If you cannot receive infinity and overflow and the source of all that is provided to you in the truth of this world, not in the illusion of scarcity and competition, but in what is available. If you are competing with another, if you think that your life force is threatened by anybody else, so somebody else's success means that your failure, if any of that is true in your reality, and if it's true for you as you're listening, then just know you are not living connected to your true source. If you believe in your business, if you believe in your personal life, if you believe in your dating life, that anybody else can take something from you that is yours, truly yours, then that's the source of that thing didn't come from infinity. It didn't come from the universal connection point to your source connection. It came from someone else's, or it's not real at all, and people are now fighting over something that's not real, and that happens all the time. And so I opened up this Pandora's box I was so resistant. I was like, I do not want to get rid of this. This is the thing that makes me better than other people, right? This is the thing that drives me. This is the thing that I'm going to be successful on. And when you're raised in capitalism, when you're raised in hierarchy, when you're raised in elite elevations, steps up a ladder of fulfillment and award and merit on what you do, on what you have, and your being and who you are is very not important, very misrepresented, very uninteresting, then you see competition as a life force. So I saw competition, or I was tapping into the competition, or the way that I received the information from my family and the way that they were competing for my grandmother's life force was, it's a dog-eat-dog world. I've got to get mine before someone takes it from me. So even though energetically I was like, the source of me needs to be the foundation upon which I live my life, the imprint and the belief system and the operating mechanism for how I used that life force was still founded on these laws of competition, of lack of supply and demand, which was finite. And if someone had one, I couldn't have one, because there weren't even two. So back into the realm of infinity, 1 + 1 = infinity, there's no competition. Because what are you competing for? Who are you competing with? When you are with another in infinity, you amplify, magnify, you make far more than what your individual and what their individual can do. So you bring the codes of you together, your coordinates intermesh in togetherness, in unity, in harmony, and in infinity, and more is created. So a bee with a flower, the flower is not scared that the bee is going to take its nectar and take it away and it won't have any. That's not how nature works. We are part of nature. It's just that we forget that because we've been living outside of nature for so long under the rules of patriarchy, under the rules of capitalism, under the rules of false artificial time and false artificial creation. Those predicating years is now what's leading to the mass adoption and worldwide belief that artificial intelligence has intelligence. There's no intelligence in artificial intelligence, there's just artificial. But when you have been assimilating to and calibrating to the artificial for so long, and somebody else tells you that which you yourself feel, if you're talking about your wounding and you're talking about your problems over and over and over again, and it validates for that and amplifies that and it magnifies that, then you are going to be feeling validated. So an example of that, if I told AI being competitive, it's the best thing about me. I love that it drives me, it motivates me, it pushes me to excel. I hustle, I grind, I do all of those things. And I say that to the AI, it's going to celebrate me in that wounding, in that disconnection, because all it can do is mirror back to me what I've said to it. The Akashic records are different. The Akashic records hold truth as a binary source. It's either truth or it's not. The end. And so when I argued on competition being something I needed and something that was me, that was an innate personality trait of me, something I had cultivated and worked on and celebrated within me, that it was the source of everything that I could do and had done. It didn't validate that. It didn't argue back. It held the note of truth. And it said, if that's your reality, that's fine. There is no time. And when you are ready, you will return here with curiosity, intrigue, interest, and you will ask questions. And the end. No, either argue with me and prove your point or validate me in my claims that competition is the best aspect of me. I'm competitive and I'm driven and I'm motivated. But it doesn't. And that's why truth is, when they say intuition is whispers, it's not that it's whispers, it's that it doesn't argue. You don't want to know? Okay. We'll see you next lifetime. We'll see you next year. We'll see you when you're ready. We'll be here. But we don't bend to you. We hold the note of truth. We do not diffuse in any way. We do not diminish. We do not titrate. We hold. And so I exited that. And then I started to assess. Wait, hold on. I was this person who was receiving all these codes and collapsing identity out of label in order to find the truth of me internally. Is this one of these things that now I need extra hand-holding around because, wait, maybe competitiveness is not a personality trait, it's not even real, it's not even required, it's not even interesting. And so we did the Akashic clearing on my competitiveness. I fell into the biggest heap of my life. I didn't know how to get out of bed. I didn't know where to find the source of my desire to move forward, because my receivership was still coming through a lens of the masculine. So it's like the masculine is the output, but I was getting my input was plugged into my output, and my output was plugged into my output. And I was like, wait, how am I functioning like this? So I moved those pins and I put the output in the output and the input in the input. And I didn't know how to do anything. And that was the point. I shifted from my mind tells me what to do, and then I go and do it with all this testosterone, this cortisol, this adrenaline, this push, this drive, this hustle. And I stopped that because I literally physically couldn't. I'd been rewired, I'd been recalibrated. And I couldn't do anything for a month. And for someone that had never known how to relax, never known how to stop, never known how to rest, receive, and just be, it was the greatest torture of my life, which is why I remember it 10 years later. I hated that month. I hated it. And I was staying with them, and they had a, I don't know what you call it. I'm going to call her a helper. I don't want to call her a servant, but it felt like it at some point. For me, it was so uncomfortable to be waited on, to be cooked for, to be, because I had been hyper independent from such a young age that leaving overseas at 18 didn't feel like any change in my life. It felt like a completely normal thing to do. And so when the calibration was complete, I started having these visions of the world, of what it could be. And there were multiple calibrations around not just like coming out of the doing and the having and the ego and the drive and all the vices and all the numbing and all of that. But, there was so much deep pain held within my body. And I learned to alchemize it. I learned how to feel it to the intensity that I needed to feel that. So it's like, I don't just feel pain. I feel the full impact of that pain, the anger, the anguish, the decimation, the betrayal. I feel it all, and I sit there and I sit there and I sit there, and it becomes hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And I stop running from the fire, the flame, and I turn and I stand in it, and I become flame. I become the intensity and the heat of those emotions, and I alchemize them. And in that alchemy, I find the motivation. And all of a sudden, I use the feminine ability to feel and receive and know and intuit and use my body and use the body creation system to find the motivation from within, that fuel and that next step. But equally, it was, I step into the flow, I step into the creation, and the spontaneity and the synchronicities unfold and create. And so I started to learn, wow, there's a time to gestate and there's a time to flow. There's a time to stop and to feel and to hold and to grow and to create from the womb as you would a child. And then when that intensity grows so big, there's going to be a birth. And you birth that, and it expands into the world in a way that you alchemized something, you created something, you gestated something. You took a seed and you grew it into an outcome. And then alternatively, sometimes you're flowing like water through the beds. And in both cases, you're being held by this masculine of you, which is either the bed of the river and you, the feminine, are the water. And you're moving through and you're holding yourself and you're holding your current and you're tapping into the universal current. You're tapping into the synchronistic mechanism that organizes the universal creation outcomes, and you're following the direction, you're following the energy, and you're stepping. Each time, right as that synchronistic event tells you, come here. And so you're so in sync and you're so in flow and you're living in natural time and you're living in natural harmony. And then there are other times where the feminine actually needs to retreat and go deep and go dark and alchemize those deepest emotions, gestate them, and to create something of ultimate power and force. And the masculine holds that container, still, silent, and in that form of, I'm at the edge of the cave as you birth this, and I am fighting any lion that comes. You're safe. Be in your intimate space. I've got you. And so I started to learn these aspects of receiving as I plucked out all of this other stuff that was putting me into the hustle, the grind, the patriarchal, the capitalist. And so as I left, I stayed training, had a 6 months training where I was never taught anything in a way that I learned it from someone else, but I was taught something in the way that I had the space, I had the container, and I had somebody who held the codes, or at least held open the Akashic records in the energetic alignment that I needed to download all those codes and activations for myself, which is really fundamentally what we're all doing, is we're activating our own rememberings of our own biology, of our own coding, of our own system, so that we can bring that online. And so when I came back to Australia, there's a part of me that was really lost, because in the confinement of that training space, I could do anything. And I was astral traveling, I was remote viewing, I was doing all the things that are really cool. You know, I was blindfolded and I could like read books, you know, all these really cool things that like we all know how to do with the application of our biotechnology system. And I'm teaching my daughter, who's 3 years old, like, how do you see pictures without seeing them? Like, how do you use your energetic eyes? How do you use your remote viewing? Because these are biological aspects of our biotechnology system. And women are biologically wired to see beyond the veil, to see what's there, to create that which has never been before. We create children that have never existed. So we know how to do this. It's easy. When we learn all of these things, and when we come into the body system and we learn how femininity can be created, and then from that place, how to create in a feminine way through feminine techniques and embodiments. And I think the reason that we've gone into all of the depth of all of this is because in 2017 then, I came back to Australia and I was like, I'm going to teach this, or I'm going to create business differently. I'm going to do this, and this. And I went out to do that without fully dismantling the masculine approach or fully standing up and embodying the feminine approach. And so what I mean by that is I then attempted to hustle, to grind, to overwork, to build a business devoid of pleasure in my life from a place of hustle, from a place of masculine drive, from a place of not necessarily competition, but the remnants of what competitive behavior and styles of business were common, let's say. And I knew that at some level, I knew it wasn't working because it was becoming less and less enjoyable. And I was struggling to sustain it. And I was struggling to want to keep on, doing work so quickly and so hard on creating what I wanted out into the world that I didn't create the structure around it in the masculine way. I created the drive to push it out in a masculine way. And so what I came to understand as I collapsed that was it was completely unsustainable to my body, but I hadn't understood it yet. So it was almost like, my guides, my universe, my body system, the activation codes that needed to unfold next was, okay, you need to go and learn so many different business models. You need to become an expert in building something from scratch in a variety of different ways. where you can actually access the codes of every single person in the vicinity of this. And so I got put into the role of a venture capitalist, which is an intense and incredible initiator of business. Because along this way, I haven't been telling you, but along this way, I've been creating lots of different businesses, and they were always invitational and intentional business, impact-driven businesses and all of this. But there was a mistake that I was making over and over and over again, which was exactly what I had just described, is that I could work like nobody else and drive something forward, but it was always dependent on my effort. It was always dependent on what I was doing with my physical hands and legs, mind and brain and mouth and everything to move something forward, to push boulders uphill. And what I came to learn over the close to a decade that I then worked in venture capital was I was accessing the codes of some of the most extraordinary entrepreneurs who held big visions and universal codes of unfolding. And that's when I started to realize, okay, I am more of a universal practitioner than a grassroots local community driver. Doing anything in a grassroots community basis really drained me of my energy. I loved what these people were doing. I recommended them to anyone that I could. I wanted to fund them. I wanted to support them. I wanted to be involved. But every time I did, my energy would collapse. Whereas when I was in the venture space, where it's really around these universal principles and universal future scoping change, and really visioning into the future and making those changes here backwards into the now. So it's like you see the world in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and you bring that back into what needs to happen today to get us there. What's that technology? What's that, what are those goals? What are those changes that need to make? And what's the hypothesis for the technology or the solution, or what's even the hypothesis of what the actual problem is and what the actual problem is that needs to be solved? And so I was in this space of constantly thinking about what is the world that I wish to be crafting, that we need to fund, that we need to put energy into, that we need to put resources into. And so over the course of my time in this entrepreneurial space, in this visionary space, I would have personally spoken to, interviewed, had relation with close to 1,000 entrepreneurs. Then on top of that, all the other VCs or the researchers or all of this. And so this was this potent time of going, okay, now I'm receiving all of the codes of this. And, I made it to a pretty high level in that industry because of who I am, because of what I think, because of how I work, a lot of different things, to the point where I started to again identify with the identity of I'm a venture capitalist. I want to do these things in a fund, or I want to fund these kinds of people. And again, I got so caught up in the identity of that, thinking that that's what, it's easy to have a career in some respects. It's really hard to be a change maker. It's really hard to be an initiator of a body of work onto the planet. But I got those codes and I understood how to do it. I understood how to think that way. I understood how to create in that way, how to bring teams together, how to bring people into your vision, how to amplify the vision, how to do 1 + 1 = infinity. And then, bring even more and more and more, and bring money into that, and bring resources into that, and to create a movement, to create a community around that belief and that vision for what this hypothesis could change for the world. And when my training was complete, I was ejected from that, and I completed my final body of training. And by the way, ejected from something that you've learned or that you've got enough of what you need out of isn't a negative thing. But if you're stuck in a patriarchal system where what you do is very important to who you are, then it will feel hard. But for example, if you graduate from university, you don't feel like a failure, you feel like a graduate. And so sometimes when we finish these chapters, you need to recalibrate it to, I've graduated from that lesson. And if you ever need to know if you've graduated from the lesson that you've been ejected from or been ushered out of, try to get back into that. Try to whether it's a job or a career or study or a relationship or whatever, try to get back into it. And if it doesn't come naturally, easily, and synchronistically, then you've graduated from that, and you can move on to the next thing. And I think the other thing that the VC investment space sort of gave me was validation and some kind of level of confidence in my own capacities, in my own strengths, in my own intelligence, and the way that I see things that I wouldn't have gotten if I had only ever just been a freelance entrepreneur or a startup person, my whole life. And so that really gave me a lot of grounded capacity to move forward with my own ventures and with my own ways of creating, because I had seen so many creation models. And I was a very hands-on investor, and we would sit and we would really tinker around with what's the right model here, what's the right structure, what's the right architecture. And then because a lot of the people that I was working with were men and knew the structure, knew the architecture, even if we had to change it a little bit, they fundamentally knew how to erect that. I would come in with those feminine codes to share with them. And so we were in this receiving and giving state, as we always often are in these higher realms of unity. And when you're looking at impacting the world in a really positive way, and you're working in tandem with someone on achieving that outcome in unison, in harmony, in together, there are so many extra forces that come together to really amplify and magnify that and implement synchronicities along the way that really facilitate ease and 1, 2, 3, all the way through. Anyway, so after that graduation, my final graduation before doing this podcast and then the business PhenXX was the complete and utter decimation from DV. So it was like, okay, now you've graduated from everything that we've taught you, everything that you've activated within yourself, all of these codes, all of these being. And along this way, I was, developing sensuality, sexuality, eroticism. I was really fascinated by the sex industry, sex tech, sex workers, all of this kind of stuff, as well as sensuality, femininity, tantra, embodiment, breath work. I was a long-time yoga practitioner, all of these things. And then, obviously doing a lot of visionary work. I was always opening up the Akashic Records for myself and, continuing to do that work all along the sides, so for so many, for literally 2 decades, I was training and training. And I had arrived at this point where I was like, this is it. I feel really, there's nothing more that I could learn. Now it's just time to go and do it. And in that declaration of self, of going, yeah, I think I've got it. Basically, within a couple of weeks, my entire life blew up. I had a baby. I became homeless. I became separated from my ex-husband, and I had to navigate a rebuild in the softness and the kindness and the love and the unconditionality of that love in this time of life where I didn't expect this to happen. And I didn't understand. So I had a week-old baby, and I was completely vulnerable. And I had to learn surrender in the most profoundly challenging, vulnerable time of my life. And I don't know that there ever could be a time where you could learn surrender faster, quicker, deeper than. And because I had met my daughter in many meditations and many journeys and many Akashic readings since 2016, and she had forewarned me of this, that my arrival in your life will be the biggest and most life-changing that you will ever know, I just thought that that meant motherhood. No, motherhood was actually very easy for me compared to all of the rest of it. And so when I had wanted to drive through something before, when I had wanted to complete something, when I had wanted to create business, I always had this default mechanism of going into the masculine drive, despite the knowing and the way of doing that better. But this time I was incapacitated in such a sense that I had birthed my business, or I had conceived my business, I should say, because I had not birthed it. I had conceived my business a little bit prior to conceiving my child. And it took on a particular form. And I'm going to come 360 here. When I learned that my grandmother was giving energy into these other family members and siphoning off or stifling their own energetic signatures and their own blueprints and their own unique contributions to the world with the blanketing of her energy over them, nothing was created, or what was created was impure. And that's kind of what happens in the creation of PhenXX at first. I really wanted to create this with my, at the time, husband, and create this in a unity of our love, like I would a child. And I wanted so desperately for that unity to come together, the masculine and the feminine. I thought he was someone who he ended up not being, or collapsing under the weight of what I was asking him to come into, because I think that he is who I think he is. He is connected to the part of unity consciousness that I see him and felt him in when we were together. But I was doing that thing that my grandmother was doing, was I was putting all my energy into him. I was like, this is love, this is love, this is love. Take this, take this, take this, and I will bring you up, and I will bring you up, and I will bring you up. And there was a great confusion from my end, and probably from his, about who he was, not only in our marriage, but in our business, because I was so orgasmic at that time. I had come into a place in life where I was looking back at my grandmother's energy, I had 10 times, 20 times, 30 times more energy than her. I was running, all of these businesses, these investments, and personal investments as well. I was running my household. I was helping him in all of him, what he was doing. I was taking care of my body. I was taking care of my mind, my spirit, my health, my everything. I was glowing. I was feeling amazing. I was magnetic. I would walk down the street and men would turn their heads, and I knew it. And why I chose him as a husband is a subject for another podcast. But the point is that I had my pick. I had my energy locked in. I think the easiest and most succinct way of saying I chose him as my husband because it replicated the way in which my grandmother imprinted onto me how to love someone, is to actually flood them with your own life force energy and bring them up, and then create them as who you want them to be, because it's your energy. And if you love yourself so much, then flood your energy into somebody else, and then have that person be in the likeness of you, as you get to control them with your love and with your life force and with your energetic signature. And that's why it worked so well. We were so in sync. We were so in love. We were so in unison. And I was circulating more and more energy, and I was like opening and opening and opening. I was doing all my feminine practices to tap into greater access. And so I never had a shortage of energy because I was so tapped into a universal, infinite energy source that it was like, it's fine. I get more here. I get more here. You take that. I get more here. You take that. And that was circulating and circulating via him. So I knew how to circulate my system, but I just rerouted it via him. And it was a real ego trip for me, right? Because I was able to heal him of his addictive personalities and his addictions and his deficits and all of this, because I loved him so much and I brought him into this universal energy so much. And here I am tapping myself on this. Oh my God, I loved him so much that I healed him. Oh my God, I like brought him to like this amazing place. Is that me? Oh my God. Like I was fully tripping on my own self then. And I got caught up again in an identity that I am so loving, and my feminine power and eros is so powerful that I can heal men, that I can heal my husband. And I took on this project, and I had a before and an after, and I was celebrating myself, and I was in full identity with that. I was in full capacity to take kudos where it wasn't due to me. But when I had that baby, guess what? All that energy that I was supplying to him, I took it back without warning, without, precedence, without even so much as a 30-day notice period. That moment that baby came out of me, and maybe even during the birthing, I took all of that back. I needed everything that I could give, and I gave it all to her. And within a week of him detoxing from my supply, he was back in deep addiction, in deep chaos, in absolute turmoil of I don't know, because I became his supply. I became his addiction. And listen, I'm sure that if he listened to this, he would take, great argument with that. But there's a part of the energetics that I've seen and that I've journeyed on since that show the role that I played in the way that structured and got structured out. And so what happened was, as I took my energy out of him, first of all, my energy that went through him and then into the business was my energy, but tainted. So it wasn't his and it wasn't mine. So when we're doing the 1 + 1 = infinity, it wasn't 1 + 1. It was one with whatever that was, but it wasn't pure. And so as he pulled out of the relationship and the business into, the chaos and the destruction that he went into as a result of this dynamic that we were in and me ending it, the business then made no sense. It was what is this? And I felt like I had come out of a daze, and he felt he had come out of a daze. And I was I'm looking at this business going, this isn't pure. This isn't received. This was me pushing something again. And it was this realization point of oh my God, I still haven't learned. I still haven't learned how to stop. When nothing is flowing, stop. That's your time to gestate, to alchemize, to unleash, unearth, discover. But I wasn't. I was still using masculine principles in the creation of something, the pursuit of something. I was using masculine principles to create my husband into someone I wanted him to be. I was using masculine principles of creation into creating my business into this feminine business I wanted to receive. And so it wasn't clicking. It wasn't being created. It wasn't what I wanted it. It's not that it wasn't what I wanted it to be. It wasn't what I had felt and been described it as. It's I love it when I do these podcasts and I just start burping, because I know that it's something else has clicked into place for me. I'm healing this as I speak. So when PhenXX came to me before I got pregnant, PhenXX told me who she was. She told me what she stood for. She told me that I had been chosen. And it's the exact same story. I'm going to do maybe even a part 3 on how my daughter came to me, because it's very different. Manifestation and receiving are very different things. Manifestation has a lot of the old masculine push through beliefs that I'm actually talking to you about. Was like, when I received the information about PhenXX, I went into manifestation mode. But yeah, masculation mode, I think, is actually a really good term for it. Masculation mode, manifestation. It's like you think of something and then you try, I'm gonna like align my thoughts and my feelings and like I'm gonna feel it into. It's like, no. When something is from the infinity and it has chosen you as a vessel through which it will birth itself as a fully formed entity that is something, your job is to translate, your job is to carry, your job is to surrogate that and then birth it purely. It's not to tinker around, it's not to manifest, it's not to put your goals on it. And that's the difference between manifestation and receivership. And it took me another 3.5 years to actually do it correctly. And PhenXX was like, it's fine if you don't do this. We'll find somebody else. But you have been chosen and you have been, you're an energetic match to this. You came here with this connection to this project and to not only the project and what it sells, but how it's created and what it is in the creation. And so, for example, if I tried to join an incubator or try to get an investor or try to get a co-founder, it would all fall apart and it would stall. It would stall every single time. If I tried to push it into a direction it didn't want to go, it would stall. Why did it take me 3.5 years? Because I had a lot of background information. I don't know, if I was someone who had never done business before and had no idea what to do, but I was this pure channel of just like, I can follow direction and I didn't have my own independent mind, I think I could do it in 6 months. I don't have that personality. I have this like independent mind and this creative desire, and it's like, oh, I have that idea and I have that idea and I have that idea. And so every time I wanted to put my spin on this in a way that was outside of the coherence of the truth of what PhenXX is and brings and embodies and holds as a container, it would stop. You remember when I said to you about the competitiveness and I wanted to argue with the wisdom of that, and it just, okay, come back when you're ready. PhenXX has been the most incredible vehicle for shedding that which isn't in alignment with truth. And then as it revealed itself, like I didn't know the meaning of PhenXX, I didn't know the meaning of coherent beauty, I didn't know the meaning of truth, I didn't know the meaning of feminine sensuality, sexual alchemy, any of these things. I thought I did. Don't get me wrong. I thought I did. I 100% thought I did. And as I lived day by day, surrendered. And one of the most beautiful things about having a newborn baby and trying to create a business or trying to usher a business into the world is when you are breastfeeding or when you are in joy or when you are in play, you are in the feminine embodiment of receiving universal love. You are in closer connection to feminine embodiment as a mother than you are at any other time in the world. And so the realization that I actually couldn't do this business and bring this business into the world, into form, into life without my master mentor teacher whom I birthed and who was, completely 100% dependent on me for life force, in the sense of like, she needed to be fed, she needed to be clothed. But I was dependent on her life force for the education and for the embodiment into mother. Because you cannot be somebody who works 17-hour hustle days and be a mother. You cannot, biologically, you cannot ignore your child when she cries, when she tells you she needs you, when she needs to be fed. A child is hungry when it's hungry, not when you're finished. And it shook the core of what I believed business to be, to such a degree that all the hustle and all the drive and all of that pushing and urging and manipulating and coercing and controlling had to be forgotten, had to be let go of. And I will tell you that I am stubborn because it took a long time. It took a long time. I had so many ideas. I wanted to control things. I wanted things to go faster. And there's a saying in French, on peut pas danser plus vite que la musique. We cannot dance faster than the music. Because you dance faster than music, you're out of time. You dance slower, you're stepping on people's toes. You have to dance at the tempo of the music. You have to be in flow with that musicality. And what is being in flow in musicality? It is dancing. It is coming back to tango. It is coming back to union in masculine and feminine. It is the original codes of what I learned in Argentina 20 years ago when I started this journey to becoming the CEO and the founder of PhenXX. And it took my daughter to remind me how to activate all those codes that I had been collecting for 20 years, but now reorganizing them in a way that alchemized the power of who they are, who they come from, but who I am as a result of embodying them. And so when my marriage broke down and I had to step into the biggest fire of my life and I had to burn it all away and I had to step into that phoenix energy, I finally understood. Because PhenXX used to mean the phenotype of XX chromosomes. And we would ring up and I would say something and they'd be like, oh, are you from Phoenix? Sorry. Are you from Phoenix? And I'd be like, no, it's not Phoenix, it's PhenXX. And they couldn't compute that. And so as I'm standing in the cauldron of the fire of my own flames and I'm seeing myself as PhenXX, I remembered behind my desk for all of these years was this painting of a phoenix and a dragon intertwined as if they were masculine and feminine. That they were the dragon and the phoenix, the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine, and they were 1 + 1 = infinity. Now, I'm a dragon. I'm born in the year of the dragon. I am a dragon in the most complete stereotypical ways. And I needed to master my fire. I needed to master my fire in such a way that I didn't even know I had no mastery over. Because I wasn't in circles of masterminds or CEO business-led retreats or anything like that where people were talking about becoming your own flame, becoming the fire that you need to personally add enough heat to your body to alchemize every single step that you have taken on this planet into the mission that you are here to fulfill on the earth. Because we are in a world where you need to do things quickly, efficiently, productively, and with vigor, and tell your story in 30 seconds or less. It's taken me 3 hours to tell you my story, and I haven't even finished yet. Because I talk too much, and that's why I have a podcast, but that's a different story. And so here I am, understanding, oh my God, it's time for me to unify my phoenix and my dragon. And I had only ever known how to burn everything down and rise from those ashes. But how do we work together here? How do we bring the dragon and the phoenix together? And that became my next curiosity. How do we do that? And as I started this quest, I started to understand that in human design, or in Gene Keys, I guess both, we're entering the age of the phoenix. And I was like, oh my God. And as I learned what that meant, it really was this erasure of that which is incoherent to truth, and the reassembly of truth in coherence, in this optimal rising of self, in this optimal capacity to reset our world back into harmonic resonance with the actual earth and our calibration to that. And so as I started to look at all of these aspects of the phoenix and the rising and how many lifetimes I had lived, and over, and I was so good at rebirthing and dying and doing that. But it was like, but now I need the dragon to lay down the next, the grounded, the feminine. And I started to understand the dragon codes. I started to understand, and I'll do a whole other episode on that because that's going to take another hour to tell you that. But these dragon codes became unearthed. My phoenix codes became activated and unearthed. And I started to realize the symbology of everything that I had done. How the spagyrics themselves were ripped apart, burned, the ashes added back in, and the ash of what you had burned away, it's not that it doesn't serve you. I started to recalibrate that. It's that, how can that be of service to you now? Don't discard the ashes. Bring those ashes back, assess them, thank them, be grateful for them, and add them back into what can be of service to you, to humanity now. Because we've overcome that. We've moved beyond that. But those ashes are what has made the rise. We don't discard those ashes. We add them back in. That's the potency. That's the power. And that's the purification and amplification, magnification and feminine embodiment. A female embodied woman doesn't look at her shadows and hide, or look at her shadows and run away. She looks at them as if through the eyes of a mother and loves herself there anyway. And so the ashes of the plants, the botanicals that we burn during the spagyric alchemical process of creating the oils gets added back in, not because we don't know what else to do with them, but because they are the activation points of the codes that we have mastered, that we have burned through, that we have overcome, that we have embodied, and that we have grown from. And my ashes, I started to go, okay, where are all the ashes that I have that are planted all over the world? Bring them back to me. Add them back in. They're purified. They're unified. They have the codes of the feminine embodiment that I seek now to live from. I have never done a business as slowly as this, but it has taken me a long time, and even still I catch myself going back into like, we just need to get this done. And so having my daughter with me, putting bottle packages together, putting oil formulations together, she's there every single day with me now. And she is the anchor point back into joy, back into pleasure, back into femininity, into motherhood, so that I can hold the frequency of the oils of each and every one of the women that are coming to accept and receive these botanical codes planted within the oil in such a way that activates and opportunizes their feminine embodiment. That if I don't do that with joy and pleasure, then the medicine isn't transferred to the highest maximum degree. I don't know if there's going to be a part 3, but surely this has been long enough on this story for today. I am so grateful that you have given me the time to tell this in the level of depth that a 15-second reel could never do. I am so grateful that you've received the medicine from this story and that it's potentially unlocked something within you, for it has continued to unlock something within me. I'll see you next time.